Hello and welcome everybody to How to Mind the Gap with Value Stream Management to Optimize Flow. Today is March 6, 2019. Today's webinar is sponsored by TaskTop. And just a little bit about TaskTop before we get started. We were founded in 2007 and over 1 million users employ TaskTop's value stream integration technology to transform their software development and delivery. TaskTop not only unifies the software development and delivery teams, but also provides visibility into business critical processes of software delivery. TaskTop is used by global organizations in financial services, insurance, government, and manufacturing. This includes 43 of the Fortune 100 and 11 of the top banks in the world, the top 6 health plans, and 4 of the top 10 US insurance companies. In addition to our platform, we have over 58 best-of-breed tools that we interoperate with and over 300 tool versions. We've executed over 500,000 API tests on a daily basis to verify and validate interoperability. TaskTop pioneered the model-based integration approach and recently unveiled the Flow framework created by our CEO and founder, Mick Kirsten. The Flow framework helps organizations derive value stream metrics that can help track the flow of business value and software delivery in a way that both the software delivery organizations and the businesses can understand. You can learn more about TaskTop and the Flow framework at www.tasktop.com. And also brought to you by myself, Matt Anger, and our co-leader of this software lifecycle integration group, Jeff Downs. We are a virtual community of software practitioners and managers who discuss how to create tool infrastructure and processes that increase collaboration and interaction among the members of software development and delivery teams. You can join our group by pointing your web browser to www.vivid-worldwide.org/group/SLI, where we share our stories, ideas, and we work together to eliminate friction in the software development lifecycle. Just a few quick housekeeping items before we turn it over and get this started. Today's a live session and it's intended for all Vivid members. We will record this and provide it on demand after the fact where you can share with your colleagues and teammates. If you have any questions, you can also pose your questions in the webinar control panel shown here. To submit a question, make sure the questions pane is expanded and type in your question, then click send. So let's get this started. I'll pass it over to our moderator today. His name is Doug Morrison. He's a DevSecOps Practice Director at Melilio Consulting. So Doug, the floor is all yours.
Hey, thanks, Matt. Can you guys see me and hear me okay?
Yep, looks good.
Yep. Oh, fantastic. So it's really my honor today to bring a fantastic panel to us that I've been sort of following these folks for years on LinkedIn and on the conference circuit. They are all far too humble to list all their accolades and accomplishments. So, let me just say that over the past few years, I've seen them all give fantastic keynote speeches that have really sort of transformed my perception and knowledge on what it takes to deliver and improve business outcomes for our customers. First, can you see the panels, the slides there? It's Malcolm Isaacs from Micro Focus. He's the ADM Solution Marketing Manager. Malcolm brings us sort of the solutions expert perspective to the panel and promotes the scaled agile and DevOps solutions that Micro Focus is known for. And second, I have Carmen Diardo. He's our visionary on the panel. He is the senior strategist with a specialty in value stream management at TaskTop. Also a recent author of a book that I just started, Standing on the Shoulders of Leaders, Guide to Digital Transformation. It was just released on Amazon. I just started reading it. I'm already hooked. One of my favorite quotes is something to the effect that the digital age lowers the water level and exposing the hazards of that are just under the surface that impede the value flow from providers to recipients. So really great expertise and guide to successful digital transformations. Norman, I could go on. He's a 3 patent holder on software engineering from Bell Labs. I've seen him speak several times, and it's always been a fantastic knowledge transfer. And he ran one of the most successful DevOps transformations at Nationwide Insurance. It was recognized in 2016 by DevOps.com as one of the most successful transformations. And third, I have Michelle Shuttleworth. She's really our sort of boots on the ground, practical expert of the panel. She is the managing director at Deloitte's Delivery Innovation Group. And as I've heard her explain it in the past, she owns the tools and defines the methodologies that Deloitte uses to bring value and execute projects and deliver customer digital transformations around the world. So I'm really thrilled to have these three people all in one sort of virtual room to bring to you today an idea of what value stream management is. Carmen, I see you on the video here. Hopefully everybody can connect here real quickly and we'll get it going. Awesome.
It's all about visibility, isn't it?
So they're all real people, real talking heads today. Just wanted to start with maybe you, Carmen, to sort of lay the groundwork as to what is value stream management and where do you see it today?
Sure. So thanks, Doug, and appreciate the opportunity to be on this great panel. So actually, I'm going to give some of the credit to this to my peer Dominica de Grandes, because we've actually been talking about this. It's like, VSM's in my title. Maybe I should be able to explain what value stream management is. So we sort of came up with this definition of it as it's a practice to improve the flow of all activities necessary to deliver and also protect value and be able to prove it. So that's where I think some of the measurement concepts that we'll probably be talking about come into play. We view it as an emerging approach that should be done digitally and really track and measure work artifacts in real time to visualize the flow of business value. As you even said, I appreciated you reading the book, expose those bottlenecks, because my former boss, Tom Pater, who wrote a book on Lean IT with Mike Orzen, used to say, Carmen, why do we want to see things flow? And the answer was, well, we want to see where they slow down or stop. And it's really, though, not just flow for its own purpose, it's to optimize business value. So, that's kind of the working definition that we're using.
No, I like that a lot, Carmen. Thanks. And Michelle, you probably have some expertise and some examples that maybe could bring this to real world that you can share.
Yeah, I definitely follow Carmen's definition. And for us within Deloitte Consulting, it was about 4 years ago, we started to look at the work that we do and look at it differently. Our conversations all became about impacts and outcomes. So, what is your intent? What are you trying to achieve? Up to that point, a lot of the conversations had been very project oriented. I'm doing something, it has a beginning and it has an end, and I'm either on time or I'm not. And our team's also spoken in numbers. Well, I'm working on 5.5. Well, that's great. What is 5.5 and who cares? So 5.5 is happening. If it doesn't happen or if it happens late, what does it matter? So our conversations really started to shift to focus on outcomes. And it wasn't that we didn't believe that we had users beforehand. It's that we got so caught up in our own activities because the work is not easy. So when I think about value stream management, it is all about flow. It is about outcomes. It's about value. So as our teams, when they are formed, our conversation is, what is your intent? What business value are you here to derive? And when we talk about any work that's been undertaken, the team is very clearly able to articulate what it is that they are trying to achieve, for whom, and why. In our own transition to a more product mindset, to understanding the value stream within which we're operating, we've uncovered just a lot of constraints. As Carmen said, if you don't lay it out, the flow, it's very difficult to understand where are your constraints. But we also started to look at our metrics very differently as well. One of the common measures that we have used to be, well, how many tickets are you dealing with, or how many tickets are you closing? And I can talk to you more later about one of the examples where the conversation completely shifted, and the team, the team discovered that not only were we measuring the wrong things, but often, if the team could just shift their focus to here's the reason for your very being, not only the work you're doing each day, but the broader purpose, we've been able to shift results, get a lot more productive and deliver value faster.
Yeah, I definitely see that. As a partner of both TaskTop and Micro Focus, I've seen over the past 8 years the products have become more specialized and integrated, and people's metrics have become more narrowly focused. Whereas this is to basically broaden the view. I think is that correct?
Yeah, it's both broadened, but I'd also say shifted the aperture quite a bit to where it is that we're focused. Traditional IT metrics got us to where we are, but that's not where we want to be anymore. The problems we're solving have changed. The demands of the business have changed. And so we've really been able to shift how we work, how we plan, think about, and what we focus on in terms of metrics is an important part of helping our business get where they need to be.
Malcolm, what have you seen in the product space that helps address that?
Well, it's no secret that many of the products that we do are directly related to, to managing and optimizing value streams. It's about capturing the metrics. It's about testing. It's about measuring things. It's about making them visible, as I said right at the beginning. It's about putting them up in front of the team so that everyone, is looking at the same information and they've got that kind of reference back to, why are you doing this? As Michelle said, what is your raison d'etre? Why are you here? And you can continuously see your relevance because you can see the work that you're doing. You can see the quality of that work. You can see where it's going and where it's ultimately destined. So we use our tools internally to develop our tools. So over the last 8 years or so, you've seen a shift in within the industry, and if you've been seeing the stuff that we've been putting out, there's been a huge shift in our more recent products, where we've moved to a more software as a service model. We've moved to a more of a continuous deployment type of model. We're releasing much more frequently. And we're able to trace everything that we do, all the way from the business requirements down through our pipelines, down to the business, down to the release, and then coming back with the feedback that we get from the field, bringing that back in for the next our next iterations or our next set of user stories that we want to work on.
Yeah, I can definitely say that you guys have changed your mindset about open source and embracing all the other products that make up the whole dev ops value stream, and with that somebody has to sort of put it all together and give visibility to the business, and I think that's what we're trying to get to, right? Maybe Carmen, you can talk about how TaskTop helps realize that or recognize that.
Sure. So I think when we looked at, Mick's book is all about project to product, but I think when we looked at it, when I was at Bell Labs,
maybe I just you're referencing Mick's book, and I think it's a fantastic read. Also, maybe you can just give the title and what it. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. If I wasn't in a hotel, I'd have mine with me too.
Right. So, project to product, which is by IT Revolution, Gene Kim's company. So if you go to itrevolution.com, you can see it. But I think when I came into Nationwide, what I found is this project-centric model, which was almost like a new IT world to me, a little bit scary, where and I think what we saw were things like instead of bringing work to teams, people were moving to the work, right? So you were constantly forming and reforming teams, and so I think through the development of the book, we came up, there were these common problems that we saw with the project model, and I think probably as we go through the call, we'll get into some of them, but I think one of the key ones was IT was disconnected from the business and the vision. and we're speaking different languages. IT was a black box and solving its own problems, which got into having this model of a cost center. So mixed model was really around, well, if you want flow, first of all, you need integration, right? So TaskTop's core was really around integrating tools, but not just the tools, it's really the artifacts, because the artifacts kind of tell the story in your value stream, the features, the defects, the incidents, all those artifacts are floating around, but we tend not to have them tell their story, right? We don't really understand and mine the information on about how long things are taking, where they're going. We do exercises. I'm sure Michelle has stories where you get people together in a value stream and they have very interesting conversations like, okay, let's start with a production incident, or let's start with a feature. What happens? Till the point where it gets released. And there's all kinds of conversations. Well, there's emails and there's meetings. And who knows, it may be in a tool, it may not be in a tool. Sometimes it's in a tool. So it's kind of trying to get your handle around, visualizing how these artifacts really represent the flow of features and defects and risks and debt, and then associating them with a value stream, because left on their own, they don't really tell a story. But if you can start to associate, for this value stream, here's where a feature starts, here's everything we go through until we release it. And it's kind of a different way of looking at something like value stream mapping, because it's really relying on the digital footprint that we're using from the artifacts and the tools. And then on top of that is then flow metrics, right? Things like flow time, flow velocity, flow load, which is WIP. And I think an important one is flow distribution, because many times in a project-centric world, everything's about features. But in a product world, you have to look not only at features and defects, but also risk, because we know how important that is. And then debt, which is your investment in how to go faster, either technical debt or process improvements. And so it's trying to give more of that holistic view from a value stream product perspective, so that you can then have the right conversations about not just flow, but also about business results that come from that.
Yeah, I think that's a great concept, that those four things really provide value to the business, and they're really mutually exclusive, right? That the IT only has so much capacity, so you have to pick and choose. And traditionally, maybe some of them were not being well communicated to the business, and when they carved out time from enhancements, and the business thinks that nothing's happening, right? So,
Right.
I mean, Michelle, have you guys seen anywhere where people have been successful at demonstrating that, and what effects that might have?
Yeah, so as I was listening to Carmen, I was thinking about a couple of different things, not only what our journey was, but what I see with clients, and also where people are struggling. And it's interesting, you start at the very beginning, and the number one question that I'm seeing people ask is, once you've got, okay, what is a value stream? It's what is my value stream, or streams, because sometimes the way teams are structured, they may be part of more than one value stream, which in itself could be a problem. A couple of the things at the very beginning, as we were getting started, and you just think about the traditional concept of value stream management, and even just the way that we estimate work. Everybody estimates doing X deliverables, or whatever it is, that whatever the work is that you're doing, and the standard estimates are all around what it takes to create that deliverable. But from a value stream management perspective, when you look at what the handoffs are and the waste and the wait time, yes, standard estimates become something that are directional at best. So I think a couple of the things that I've been thinking about, and as we had to think through with our teams, is first trying to help each team understand what is your value stream. Start to think about where you have the constraints, where maybe just the internal process is actually creating additional handoffs and wait time, and maybe where some of the structure of the team is not allowing for the flow, and then start to relook metrics. because the example that I gave at the beginning, traditional metric is how many tickets am I dealing with, or how many tickets am I closing, without thinking about the example that I had in my mind is one of our teams that deals with provisioning of software. And an ideal situation would be that there are no tickets, because if you need software, surely you shouldn't need to request software and then have a problem with making that request and needing to open a ticket. So it's really interesting as the team starts to have a look at what is the value that they are focused on, what is their flow, where are their constraints. So that led to a total challenge of what are the metrics that we really need to be focused on in order to derive value, and what's getting in our way.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think the other point, the wait times, that's key to be able to identify. And then as the tools and the teams become more specialized and start having their own processes and methodologies, be able to identify those handoffs. I saw a statistic that developers spend at least 50% of their time going to get the work and the details required to actually do coding projects. And that's the least gratifying part of their day, is attending meetings or going into other systems outside of their IDE. So making this flow freely is key to many levels.
It's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up developers. As one of the things that we're having a look at right now in terms of delivery efficiency, which is how do you increase flow, and what are the major constraints? And it's interesting that example you gave of developers spending a lot of time trying to get content. Well, how do most of us do specs? They're in Word documents, right, which get circulated, and then it's whose laptop has it, or which version in your document management system do I look at, and who needs to review it. So it's really interesting, very, very simple activities that are causing a lot of the choke points, and what is it that you can do to ease that. So that's something that we're in the process of tackling, looking at our overall flow of delivery and saying where is the most effort in delivery, and what are the constraints to getting that work done as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and then being able to communicate that right back to the business, right? It's not about story point velocities and burn downs. It's more about how time to closure for defects.
Yep, yeah, and from a business perspective, we try not to reveal the trouble that we have trying to get work done. Much more turn the conversation to making sure there's a really clear understanding of what business problems being solved, but you've got to get constraints out of the way of your team so that they can focus on the right things.
So a lot of what you guys are talking about, seems to be very, DevOps centric. And what about customers that are sort of, still in that hybrid model, which I think is most of my customers? How does this fit, in the customers that are still, 1 foot in traditional waterfall, enterprise project execution, and then still agile and getting into DevOps?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that it really matters what your delivery approach is, because I think any of us are yet to find users, who wanting anything other than their problems solved. So I think it's important. I think it's really important that no matter what your delivery approach is, and you're right, Doug, most of the time it's a blended approach. Is no matter what the delivery approach is, to have a look at what is it that we need to do to help the teams understand the value that they are charted, and that makes sure that work is constructed in such a way to ease the flow to get to value. Most of the teams, I was giving you that example on the provisioning side, I was sitting recently listening in a meeting, and the conversations around work that the teams were doing, and yet I kept hearing the same thing over and over again about multi-factor authentication. And so the question that I asked is, well, what is the number one complaint that our end users have? And it's like, okay, they hate multi-factor authentication. It's like, okay, it's an evil we cannot make go away, just given the cyber world that we live in. But why don't we take all resources and let's focus on solving that biggest pain point? So it's definitely, regardless of the delivery approach, I think just recentering teams on value, and then helping direct capacity to those largest problems to get them out of our way, versus just coming in on the same grind over and over again, regardless of the noise that you're hearing. And it's a simple thing, but it makes a massive impact to our end users.
So I think I hear you saying that it brings visibility to the prioritization and sort of level sets everybody's priorities.
Exactly. Yeah. Absolutely drives what work needs to get done.
That's tremendous, and I think also bringing that visibility to the priorities or the impacts that it has to the business not only helps demonstrate IT value, but also gives employees sort of that gratification of what they did matters too, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that you can underestimate the impact on morale. All of us, cannot find enough talented team members, and everyone that we have, you want to retain. So I do think it's incredibly important. If I look at the way we were working going back about 4 to 5 years ago to the way that I see teams operating now, just the impact not only on productivity, but more importantly, a focus on continuous improvement. The team knows, because they've heard me say it, they really have learned how to learn, continually challenging and redefining for better outcomes. But it's actually improved morale of the group as well, which I think is really important.
So yeah, one of the results in mixed flow framework on the it's called a business result. I mean, is happiness, but it's not the happiness of the consumers of the product. It's the happiness of the team working in the value stream, because as Michelle said, it's kind of a leading and a lagging indicator. If a team is happy, they're going to be more productive. If they're more productive, definitely, they're going to be happier. And Mick actually tells a story about, there's relationship there to debt, that if you have a team that's drowning in debt, then it's going to affect their happiness. And you're going to see that also in the other flow metrics, but that's something that needs to be prioritized and made visible. And a lot of times I see teams are not given capacity to actually focus on making the next thing better. And so, that gets you into a death spiral, because if you're not investing in debt, all those other flow metrics are going to go the wrong way. So, that's a key learning and a principle that we have to keep front and center as we take teams through this journey.
So for anybody on the call that's not familiar with the concept of technical debt, can anybody just explain that real quick? What is the value that is?
Go ahead, Malcolm.
No, technical debt is the bane of many organizations when you need to perform architectural refactoring and retrofitting code in order to make progress, and making quick fixes so that you can get ahead. But in the back of your mind that at some point you're going to have to go back to that quick fix, and you're really going to have to do it properly, because if you build on loose foundations, those foundations are eventually going to give away. It might not be today, it might not be tomorrow, but it's going to be someday, and you're going to have to pay the price. And debt is a very good word to use for it, because if you don't pay it back, you're going to be paying interest on it.
So updating documentation or underlying pinnings and technologies and versions and upgrades of the back end infrastructure. That's sort of the type of technical debt.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I always think about it as the accumulation of all of the decisions that we made along the way in order to make progress. So in some ways it's a necessary evil. One of the examples that we had a couple of years ago, our estimation solution, we had made very deliberate choices to do functional release after functional release after functional release. That was because we were being responsive to needs that came directly from our end users. The impact that had on us was we had chosen not to do, using your example, Doug, any architectural reviews. And what was interesting is our team was becoming pretty worn down. We were looking at what it was taking us to do a release and didn't like the answer. The answer was too long. And the reason it's taking us so long was because of technical debt. In the end, it's one of those where you go, I'm going to make a knowing decision. I don't love the outcome, but the knowing decision was to go ahead and to eventually we had to stop those functional releases and build a brand new product, and it was the only way out. what's really fun now, both that provisioning team that I was giving you the example of and this estimation team accounts for technical debt when they're thinking about their work. And they ask, when they're doing their planning, their quarterly and sprint planning, they allocate a certain amount of capacity. And that is really rewarding because you know that we're on a different path when the teams are making different choices.
Yeah. I think technical debt typically is that black box of IT that people see as a cost center, right, and never gets exposed.
Yeah, and there's also other types of debt, right? So one example, it's almost I would call it a process debt, is sometimes to get things under control, you may implement a process. For example, I'm sure we've all lived with or seen environments where there's freezes, right? Well, we're going to do a code freeze or a test freeze or something. And that was instituted because maybe there were quality issues. And so, you were allowing more time to do a lot of things that might have been manual activities to ensure higher quality. And that was fine at the time, and that made sense. But now over time, if we've actually doing more automation and we're trying to get faster, we need to then invest in that process and improve it. And so, it's really an investment in something that's going to make us go faster. And as you said, Doug, a lot of times that gets under the covers of some IT, black box where we don't expose that, we don't prioritize it. As Michelle said, we don't provide capacity for it, we don't make it visible, and so it just accumulates, and to the point where then it's affecting, as Malcolm said, our delivery of business value.
And I think there's also an issue of unknown debt. There's debt that you accumulate that you're not really aware that you've accumulated it, and until at some point, your whole system slows down. You've got one additional user that you never factored into the equation who's logging into the system, and it's slowing the whole thing down. And that's why we're a firm believer of bringing of shifting testing left, right? Shifting testing left, right? Shifting testing left, bringing it closer to development, because that way you can expose those areas that you at some point you're going to have to work on them. If you can work on them earlier, the effort to work on it and fix it now is going to be much less and much cheaper than fixing it later on down the line. You stand a better chance of not letting it accumulate. You pay back the debt at the earliest possible opportunity. So you keep your flow, you keep your business going, you keep delivering value to your customers, and yet you're still paying off that debt as you go. And the great enabler, I think, is the ability to perform more, particularly automated testing up front, and not just performing testing but acting on the results. It's getting continuous feedback, and it's making those continuous improvements in order to improve that throughput and reduce your debt as you go.
Michelle had mentioned earlier that value stream management helps level set priorities, but I think it maybe even has another value add in that it helps make better long-term priority decisions versus just short-term choices repetitively and consistently. Anybody have an example of maybe where we've shed light on that and helped customers, or maybe a task app or at Micro Focus make better long-term choices?
Yeah, I think at different points in a product life cycle, you're going to make different priority decisions. So, when you first put something out, you may be feature rich. I think we had an example of a team where we had a new product when come out in 2017, and it was feature rich. And then what tends to happen is you accumulate debt and defects, and that's the point where then you have to make a conscious decision, maybe to refocus on that debt and defects, so that you then get back to a point where you can make another push on a feature delivery. And so at different points in your life cycle, you're using and you're keeping your finger on the pulse of what is that distribution, where are we in the life cycle, what makes sense for us right now, not just for the next month or two, but the next 3 to 6 months, so we don't get caught up in that death spiral where as Malcolm and Michelle have said, our debt has accumulated to a point where I can't get anything through the system now.
Yeah, I think a lot of our customers can relate with that. So, value stream management to me seems like the secret sauce to a lot of digital transformations, or something that's been missing for years. You guys have any examples of where you think it, has, turned the ship around, or, helped write these initiatives?
Yeah, all day, every day. I was just thinking, the couple of examples that I've been sharing there. So the team that I lead is roughly 100 people. And as I said, we started the shift a couple of years ago, but the conversations with the team, when I look at the work that we were doing, I can't, at the time, I think that the right value was being delivered. But if I look at where we've gone, and I don't believe that there's any group that would be in many groups that would be in remarkably different situations. Year on year, we don't get more resources. We don't get more money every year. In fact, I'm quite certain there's a couple of folks who might be sitting there with similar conversations to the ones I have each year, which is, hey, budgets changing by 10, 20, or 30%, and it's not in the direction you want. So when I have a look at where we would be now if we hadn't done what we've done in terms of shifting the work, and this is a combination of things. It's a product mindset, just as Carmen described, as well as thinking, reframing the work around impacts and outcomes and value, and challenging how work is done. Even going as far as challenging when we record time. We've been talking about technical debt, and as I chat to clients, I'm often surprised that not only are time entry codes are not set up for products, that they're actually set up for projects, and that time is not tracked around where am I doing continuous improvement and where am I doing operational style work. Some of it is necessary evil just to keep the lights on, but a lot of the operational things we've been talking about, like improving how you work, is what frees up that extra capacity. So I can say, fairly comfortably that had we not shifted how we were working, we would not be able to hold the portfolio we hold today. Our portfolio is about 10 times the size that it was in terms of the number of products that are supported, number of end users, than it was 5 to 10 years ago. But our team hasn't grown in that way. So that's an example of, what do we do to deal with the ongoing business challenges of your budget? Budget's getting smaller each year. Demands are certainly not getting smaller, they're increasing. So what we've been hearing for 20 years around better, faster, cheaper, and happier, which just to quote John Smart there, it's only getting louder, it's not going away. So.
Yeah, I think that's a great perspective, and I think maybe traditionally I've seen customers that just track their efforts based on operational versus innovative project work, the two categories, and they always treated the operational work like it's sort of a necessary evil.
Yeah.
So, Malcolm, did you have? I know
for us,
has gone through that too. Yeah, similar story.
Yeah, so I was going to say, well, you say Micro Focus has gone through it. I say we're going through it, and I think it's probably true of most organizations today. I would not say that we're done. We're continuously looking for more places where we can optimize more, in particular, more opportunities for cooperation or collaboration. Not so much within product groups or business units, because we've been doing that now for quite a few years with great success. But we're now talking in terms of breaking down silos between different product groups and cooperating across those those lines, which is a bigger challenge. It's a very juicy challenge. I think the benefits are huge. So it's something that we keep on doing. We keep looking for the next thing to improve, and the next place where we can optimize. So we're not done yet.
I think that's a great point, right? I don't, it's a journey, and I always encourage people to start small, treat it like an experiment. Nationwide has a great story. If you go out and look for Cindy Payne and Jim Grafmeyer give a great talk at the Chiefs Conference in 2017 on this. And, you started and you treat it as an experiment. And from that perspective, then, you get stories from those teams that are being successful, because a lot of this gets into culture. And the stories of teams that are successful is what really starts to make a difference from a culture perspective. Because I could give talks, my team could give talks, but it was really that culture of the other teams and them taking credit and them giving the talks that made a difference. So, don't be afraid to start small, experiment, and build those success stories, because that really then starts to drive the culture and get other teams excited about what they're able to do.
And I love your use of the term experiment, because a lot of what we do is around experimentation. And I think to be successful, you need to have an environment that fosters experimentation and doesn't punish failure. I think it's very important that there is backup from the top to allow people to make, to have a certain amount of self, responsibility within their own areas, and go ahead and make some changes. Obviously, make them sensible changes, but if it doesn't work, then that's fine. Just course correct, learn from the mistake, and fix it. That's the best way of learning. Is to fail and pick yourself up and learn from your mistakes. And as long as the culture of the organization allows that, without punishing that kind of behavior, then you're definitely doing the right thing.
Yeah, I think this is a concept that can apply to anybody, which is brilliant, and I think it really does speak to the value. It's right in the name, and that's the key motivator to anybody that wants to make transformations. Where do you suggest customers start? How do they get started with educating, or maybe even without making a big deal about it? How can they innocuously slip this concept in?
Oops.
Well, I think I already talked a little bit about. One of the approaches that we used when I was at Nationwide was we encouraged teams to do a book club around the DevOps handbook, and we viewed that as. But then what we said is, we want you to come up with a list of things that you think will make you faster, right? Going back to the Deming concept, the people who are doing the work have the best idea of how they can get better. And they came up with ideas really that kind of blew us away, right? We thought, we had a team of folks with sort of this center of excellence across the value stream. And we had ideas of what we thought would make people go faster, but they picked things sometimes that completely surprised us. But as Malcolm said, you give them that safety, safe environment where they can actually do experiments, and then their enthusiasm and the amazing things they did, and we had show and tells with executives, that really made a difference, because the executives were hearing it directly from the team. They felt their enthusiasm, and that had more of an impact than a million talks that I could have ever done.
Yeah, that's a great example. And you maybe the other one I was thinking too is just starting with an artifact and mapping the flow of an artifact through an organization, right?
Right. We have the exercise that we call value stream canvassing, which actually just starts with, like I said, either an incident or a feature. And I think Michelle probably alluded to this, right? You get the people in that value stream, have the conversation about, well, what happens from this feature until production. And it's kind of a lighter form of value stream mapping, but it still has, you capture that information and try to see what artifacts are actually impacted and how maybe, because it's really about where the work is waiting. It's not the people that are waiting. I mean, yes, people will always find something to do, It's the work is waiting, and it's hard to know where the work is waiting because you can't just go up and see it. So doing some visualization of that, I think, is, you know, very eye-opening for people to actually. We've had managers that attend these and say, "Wow, I didn't know that's how things work." Right? So you know you're getting value when the managers are learning how things actually work, because not everybody was ever there to tell the story at one time about actually how did we go from a portfolio team to writing the code and then releasing it in production.
Yeah, everybody's so specialized these days. You know, they only know their piece of the manufacturing line, right, of code delivery or software change. Yeah, I don't know if anybody have an example of a particular artifact or the process, or you know how they go about implementing it. You know, value stream management, or any of the metrics, maybe the outcomes.
So I'm not sure that I have a specific example, but I was going to make the point about the metrics and about measurement and making it visible. And I think it should also be zero effort to measure the value of that metric, or to measure the value. It shouldn't be something that you need to put much effort into. You don't want to have an action item or a user story of capture the value or measure the metric. It should be collected automatically. It should be friction free. And once you can see, once you've chosen what you want to measure and you can start seeing where you are, that's really when you can start thinking about how you can improve those numbers. Whether it's the number of defects that you have in your product, whether it's the number of releases that you're delivering every month, whatever you choose. And again, don't choose everything. Choose a small number of metrics that you've got some control over. Start small. Carmen already made that point. Start small, make that work for you, make some improvements, and then start building out and building across to make additional improvements.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that. That's already a concept baked into a lot of the Micro Focus products, especially in the testing world. Yeah, that's a great point. And I think the idea that it has to be frictionless, I like that word. It has to provide value without much effort, because otherwise it's just, it's an uphill battle of changing human behavior. So anybody else have anything we haven't covered yet, or areas that you wanted to specifically talk to? You guys are the experts here, and I'm honored to have you share your wealth of experience. All right. Well, we have a couple questions in the pane, and we are open to additional participants if they want to add anything, and we'll certainly answer them if we can't get to them all in the time that we have. But one of them was, have you witnessed how applications of value stream principles have directly led to marked increase in software delivery velocity? I think we covered that a little bit, but and maybe you mentioned metrics, but do you have some specifics that you guys want to reference?
I guess I could mention our focus over the last few years of moving towards an agile development methodology, or maybe even agile delivery methodology, moving on to DevOps, which is where we see ourselves now, where we're working in small batches. We're producing releases very, very, very quickly. There's quite a lot of content in each release. But that's because we choose not to do continuous delivery. We choose to release every few weeks, but we're doing that over many products now. So that's a huge change for us in the philosophy that we have around releasing. It used to be 6 months to get a product out of the door, and if defects if defects escaped, it would take quite a long time to find the defect, to reproduce the defect and fix it and issue a patch. Now our response time is very, very fast, and it's been a huge change. The whole organization has changed its philosophy and the way that we're delivering software over the last few years. and very successfully.
Excellent. One of the ones here, and another question is, when measuring risk for a value stream, what do you factor into the equation? That's one of the, the value type work types that we haven't really talked too much about. Anybody want to tackle that one?
Well, I think the first thing with risk is the fact that in a project model, it's even hard to get risk addressed because there's a vulnerability in a struts library. Well, what project manager wants to pay for that? It's like, that's not my, that doesn't fall under my project, right? But everyone's going to pay the price if it doesn't get addressed. So I think the first step is having those risk items be equal participants, along with the features and the defects, and the debt, to even be considered and be prioritized and be visible as they work their way through the value stream. I think the second thing is again through, you can start to see it through that distribution. If you have product and value streams that aren't investing in risk, chances are, as Michelle said, you're going to get those defects later that, well, I don't really want those defects, right? Or worse, with risk, because the exposure now is, can be almost catastrophic, depending on how much it's exposed. So it's really around making that work visible and prioritizing it in a way that allows you to make the right strategic decisions to address it, and not wait for an incident or something, and then obviously have a fire that you have to address, and you have a reputation that you can't really fix at that point.
So just to be clear, we're talking about security, vulnerabilities, compliance, things like that. Are there any other categories that would fall under risk? No.
Well, I gave an example before of performance, right? If you're expecting a heavy load on your application, we've got we just had Valentine's Day, and there's Easter coming up, and Good Friday as well, and there's all sorts of days in the year where the load on people's servers is going to be very, very significantly increased over a very, very short period of time. And that is something that you really don't want to discover in production. You don't want to go down on that day. You want to be testing that much earlier on in the process, and making sure that you can cope with that, because that's causing a real concrete risk to your ability to do business. And that's in addition to all the security issues that might come along with it. And of course, the reputation, as Carmen said, your company's reputation is on the line.
Yeah, that's a great one, Malcolm. I hadn't thought of that. Performance validation is something people typically only think about at the time of new implementation or re-architecting new hardware or something like that. But it's really an ongoing risk if it's not properly mitigated.
Yeah,
that's a great point. So, is there any other questions here? Have you witnessed how the application value stream principles have led to? Oh, I already talked that one. Sorry about that. Small window. Do you guys have any other questions, or if there's a?
Well, I wanted to address the title of this session. It's actually Mind the Gap. So a colleague of mine, Sylvia Davis, she wrote a blog called Mind the Gap, and she actually used the London Underground as her kind of metaphor for value streams. It was an evolving system. It grew in lots of unintended ways, and it kind of equates to software in large enterprises. And mind the gap is a phrase that is very, very strongly identified with the London Underground. So I think symbolically it's also about visibility and connected tool sets and connected parts of the organization. So you have that gap within the organization. So you want to try and minimize the gap and have that, you know, smooth flow of artifacts and work within the organization. But just a little story, because I was looking up Mind the Gap. So the original phrase was recorded by a number of people, but one person in particular was an actor called Oswald Lawrence, who recorded it in the late 1950s. It's a very iconic recording of Mind the Gap. It's kind of mind the gap. It's it's really, really stands out. And it was used on the Northern Line in the London Underground, and it was gradually replaced by other recordings. Now, he died in 2007. His widow, Dr. Margaret McCollum, used to visit the Embankment station just to hear the recording of her late husband's voice. But by 2012, the only station that was still using it was the Embankment station. And it, to me, as I was reading the story, I was thinking this is, it was a part of a digital transformation actually within the London Underground. But there was one part of this digital transformation that she felt very, very strongly attached to. So she came to the station one day on it was the 1st of November in 2012, I believe. Her husband's recording had been replaced by a different recording, and she actually asked the Transport for London if she could get a recording of the announcement for herself, for so that she could hear it. And they were so touched by her story that they gave her a copy of the announcement on a CD. But they also actually restored it at Embankment Station, and you can still hear it today. I thought that might be a nice, interesting.
That is pretty iconic, and I do love that metaphor that in Sylvia's blog post. That is an excellent read. If anybody hasn't seen that yet, maybe we can include a link to that, because we definitely owe the title of this session to that post. That was the first time I heard that reference. So thank you. Anybody else, any last bits to add? Anybody have anything that we haven't covered? Great. Well, I want to thank everybody for their time. Matt, I'll turn it back over to you if we have any other last slides to close out with. Oh, here we are. Just wanted to remind everybody of some upcoming Vivid events. They're here on the screen. I won't read them all to everybody, but excellent content provided by Vivid, other sessions that I highly recommend. Oh, and also, I know all of us here will be at the ADM Summit. At least I will be, and Matt, everybody else in the panel, are you going to the ADM Summit? Yeah, excellent. This is very good event that is very focused on these topics and others in the DevOps toolchain and lifecycle, and a great opportunity for everybody to network. So if you haven't considered it, please look into attending this event. I think it's one of the premier in the annually that we look forward to getting in touch with all the customers.
Awesome, and thank you so much, Doug, and thank you for all the panelists for this exciting conversation on value stream management. I just want to let everybody know that joined today's webinar that we will be providing a link to Sylvia's blog article on Minding the Gap. It's an excellent article. We encourage you to read it over. Also, too, we're going to shoot out a short survey after today's webinar, so we'd love to hear your thoughts on how we can better serve you in the future. And as always, point your browser to vivid-worldwide.org. Go ahead and sign up for one of our groups. You can help participate. You can even, if you're interested in being a panelist, a future panelist, as an example, reach out to me. My email address is at the beginning part of the slide. I'd love to have a conversation with you and include you on a future webinar. So thank you again for everybody's involvement today. We really, really very much appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day.
Bye-bye.